Hello, this is Jan from JC WebTech. I create videos with tutorials and tips and tricks for WordPress and web design in general. And today we are talking the container, the Elementor's container to be precise. It's been here for a while. Some of you are already using it for several months for sure. Some of you may be a little intimidated by it and still sticking to the rows and columns. But either way, you should be really starting to look into it, and if you are using it, maybe you are using it slightly wrong because there might be some costumes, some habits that you have from the legacy columns and rows that don't exactly translate to the Flexbox container now in Elementor. So yeah, pay attention. This is going to help you, save you a lot of time adopting these ways of using it and make your layouts more flexible, pun not intended, and also way more responsive, that you will only need to touch a couple of things and it will behave very predictably on mobile. So what is this new container? It is Elementor's implementation of Flexbox, which is CSS3 layout model that is a set of parameters basically that you can put on your HTML markup that browsers nowadays, all browsers will understand it. It's not something that Elementor invented. What Elementor is doing is allow us to touch more of the parameters that then browsers understand, but not all of them that are here, that are there in the layout model. So we will see about that. We will see the limitations, we will see how to overcome them and how to make it even better and take the most of it, most of the container. And yeah, we'll show you a couple of layouts and how to build them and how to make them responsive and predictable, and generally to understand how to work with this Flexbox and how to take advantage of it instead of being intimidated by it, because it works slightly less predictably than the columns and rows that we already know. So yeah, as I said, it may work somewhat strangely, but yeah, in this first example, I promise I will explain you the core why it might have been acting somehow that was strange and you thought it might be broken. So keep in mind that Flexbox is flexible, and actually yeah, Elementor is not really helping you to understand, not doing very good job helping you understand what is all this about in these suggested structures, because what they are doing, if I put this suggested structure here, they give me 4 columns, but if I look on the parent container, the gap is set to 0 here, while if I delete this and I just put in 1 container, its gap by default is set to 20, which is fine. But then when I start to putting in some other containers or widgets, I don't need to stick to this paradigm of putting in I don't need to be putting in like these rows that we had. I can start dropping in other elements directly. So I can do that. So I drop in this one like an image, and I will drop in a title. Now it's stacking on top of each other. First, because it's set to flex direction column, which means things stacking on top of each other. So we want it next to each other. So let's change it to horizontal. And now there are some weird things happening already. Like this is not, you can clearly see this is not 50%, this is not 50%. Little strange, but okay, so we could fix it maybe. It will not work, spoiler alert, but you may think it would work if we set the width of this widget, the width custom, we set it to 50%. this is still not 50%. Let me set the image to also to 50%. With custom 50%. Now it's kind of working. Okay, so we might be good here. And now let's stack. So this is 50%, this is 50%. Let me duplicate. Let me copy this one so that maybe I want another title here. So I would like continue this grid to take advantage of this container, so that like one of the ideas of the container is that we don't need to new container for new line, right? So I will paste it behind the image, and now I have this again, like occupying the third, this the third, and this the third. Have you seen this before? I believe so. So now I think I like may have seen this wrap thing here. So it's kind of visual, that will jump on another line. So maybe if I put this wrap, it will keep these two on one line, and the next one, that is the next 50%, will jump to the next one. But no, because there is the gap, so the 50% doesn't fit here because there is the 20 pixels of the gap. If I force it back to no wrap, there is the 20 pixels of gap that you can set to something else, but here I'm fine with the 20 pixels. So what is going on here? And now I will explain. I promise you, if this was bugging you or it was not making sense up until now, it will start. So one thing to understand is that Flexbox is really flexible. It's not exact. You need to stop thinking these exact percentages, because Flexbox works with ratios. So what is happening here is that by setting no wrap, we are forcing to have fit everything in one line, one row, so nothing is breaking. And because they are all set to width 50%, which is the same, 50%, 50%, 50%, the Flexbox framework will force these elements to occupy equal space, because they are set all equally to the 50%. So that will only effect of them setting to 50% is that they will be equal. If I set this one to, for example, 100, it will not occupy 100. It will occupy nearly the 50%, and these will share the rest. But there the gap comes between, so it kind of messes things up. So I hope now it's starting to at least make sense why it's not working, and now I will explain how to work with it more predictably. So let me for a minute get rid of this one here, delete. So this one we have set the image. Let me put some image there, just that we are working with actual thing. This is inspiring. It's winter at least in Europe. I don't know from where you're watching, but yeah, you all want to go for an adventure. So this one is inspiring. So yeah, so this one is now set to 50%, but for it to be a little clearer, let's set it to pixels. And we don't want 50 pixels, but like 200 pixels. Here, this one, and we have set to 100. So yeah, we can, well, let's also set it to 200. Not percent, but pixels. Okay, so now they are both set to 100, and they are fine because they have plenty of space, so they grew to their 200, and they are happy with it. Now, when I go here and I set the size to grow on this heading, what it will do is that it will take all the available space. It will grow over all the available space on the row. and only leave space for this image because it also fits on the row, so it will leave space for the image there. And it will do that even if we set the container to wrap, it will still stay on one line because this one has its default width 200 pixels. But it's set to grow to take advantage of anything it can have on the row, so it will only stop in front of this image. I can duplicate this image, this one will shrink and leave space for this image to be here. If now I set this image to back to 100%, remember that we have on the parent we have set the wrap, so it keeps on one line this one because it's set to 200 pixels, but it takes advantage of anything that it has left on one line. Leaves there also the image because that one also fits there, but this one jumps on the next line because there is no way that 100% would fit there. If we switch back to no wrap, it will just force them there. This is a little bit less visual because the image, it's not the image width, but okay, it's this whole element is sitting here, and it is occupying the space that is relative to the ratio between these two and this one. So yeah, this is not exact, and it may be a little bit confusing at first, but I will explain you how to take advantage of it and how to do these kind of layouts, and yeah, how to do it without pulling your hair. So before we move to these layouts, the important part to know is that you have the parent that is set to flex, which is Elementor already doing it for us, and you can set these parameters on it: the main direction, the justifying, which is the alignment within this main direction. So centering it means that I center it respectively to this direction. Aligning is the alignment to the secondary direction, so I have it set to center. You see, so I'm centering all the items like this, like vertically, but if I change this direction, you see that this changes and this applies to the other direction. So we cannot say this is alignment is for vertical or horizontal. It's always for the secondary and primary direction of the box set by this arrow here. We are setting the gap, the wrap or no wrap, to say if we want things to overflow or if we really want to squish them on one line. And you have also some settings here, which is alignment itself, which is important, which is useful if we want to break one of those elements of the major rule. If one wants to be a rebel and break out from the rules set on all the children, you can do it here. So I can now actually force it to be in the end, although it's centered for the rest of them. But I'll turn that off. I can reorder them. You can change the order, which is super handy, but it's quite straightforward. And also important one is the size. So we allow them to grow, because without the growing, it will just be occupying its own size. But with the growing, it's the true power of Flexbox, that you set it as size, but then it can be extending when it has space, which is the responsive design that we want. You can also make it to shrink or not to shrink, but I don't tend to use that much. And here you have a custom where you can manipulate this ratio on which it is growing or shrinking, but it's a little bit advanced. I didn't use it on any of these examples here. It is slightly more confusing than the previous columns and rows. They were very extremely straightforward. But if you grasp these few concepts, it's extremely powerful. So let's have a look on this first layout. What is going on here is that we have kind of different cards with different content, and obviously it's set to flex because it's by default. On the container it's in a row, but it's set to wrap, so these elements are overflowing to the next and next lines, which is like what we usually want. And we have a gap there, but they are occupying their own space, and this is thanks to the fact that they are actually set to the width not 50% but 45%, because look what happens if I set it to 50% and also this one to 50%. It would not work. Yeah, you see? So I said 45, it could be 46 probably, it could be 44, 43. It doesn't matter, they just important is the ratio, because you see if I change the ratio they start changing. So 45, it cannot be 50 because we need to leave some space for the gap here, and instead we will set it to grow. So if we don't grow it and we ignore this one, this one, if we also turn off the grow, they will occupy indeed their 45%. But if we let them grow, they will grow, they will occupy the available space, which is almost the 50% minus the gap. And this is the main idea of this tutorial. If you understand what I did here, you're almost done, but bear with me. I will still give you some very valuable examples on how to make the layout and how to deal with this gap thing. So yeah, so this is it. I have all these columns set to 45%, the parent to wrap, and I have them set to grow. And that's it. I can maybe show you here what happens. Like what is the Flexbox actually doing? Because if I set to the children by this little code here, I'm setting the children to occupy their default space that they would, and for them not to grow, and to have the default width. And yeah, you can see it's a mess. Like it's kind of stretches it according to the content, and we have no grid, no layout. So next example, now it's kind of repetition of the same, but with the twist that these are 3 columns. So here again, this is not 33.33333, it's 26, so that they fit here, including the column, including the gap, and they fit 3, they don't fit 4. The 2 would be too little, so it could be easily 25, 20, I think 27 would also work, but 26 is safe spot. Also depends on the gap that you set. But the important part is that the ratio is 1:1. They are all 26%, and not too big to overflow, nor too small for let the fourth one jump there. That's it. That's the trick how to do this, and you can continue. Like if I duplicate this one, it will jump here, and actually it will stretch over the over like this. And this is something I wanted to show you here, because I have this one set to max width 50%, so that no matter what, even if it's on the line on its own, if I delete one again, you see now it's on its own on the last row, but normally it would stretch completely because it's set to grow. But I have set here max width 50%, and you can see this is container extras. This is something that plugin called Steroids for Elementor is adding here because it's something that's terribly missing. If you don't want to add another plugin, you can also put custom CSS and put max width 50% and it would work the same, but I recommend you installing this plugin because it has amazing features. We'll link it in the description. So we set here the max width to have this last box not to stretch too much because it would look awkward. Suddenly it would stretch completely. So yeah, but beside that it's the same idea, except the width is 26% so that we have 3 columns instead of 2 columns here. Here another layout. This is a layout that was not possible previously in Elementor without custom CSS or without the steroids for Elementor, but now it is possible. I will do specific tutorial on exactly how to do it step by step, but I will explain you here how this works with the Flexbox container, how you can achieve it. And there's also a little caveat that there's a little detail you cannot do without the max width. So how is this set up? The parent is set to obviously row horizontal. This one column, like the idea is that design kind of like this, but this one is more visual what is happening here with this background. So this one is set to 50% and it is not set to grow. It's always 50%. And this one is set to width 570, which is half of the container width. I think it's the 1140 divided by 2. So it's set to this width, and it is should be set to shrink. So here I'm using shrink so that if it doesn't have the 570 pixels, it will shrink. The issue is that when we go to probably have it already here, yeah. Let me remove the max width here. So here it would work without it perfectly, but if we go to tablet, it starts to overtake on this 50%. So we don't want that. We want to for it to always stay on 50%. And actually we want to subtract from it this padding that I added here, or actually anything I added here. In terms of in a way of margin. So, and this is the amazing thing that you can do with steroids with Elementor, that you can put in these kind of calculations as it's described here. So I can say it's the max width is 50% minus these 20 pixels that are here. And yeah, so it will be 570 pixels while it can. But while it cannot be the 570 pixels, it will never overflow the 50% minus these 20 pixels. So yeah, this is how you can do this. It's called side bleed. If this was too fast, check out my other videos. It will probably be there. Or if not, very soon. So subscribe and get notified because it doesn't cost anything. This is, I'm giving this all for free. So yeah, so if it brings you any value, please let me know, because it's the ultimate reward if people find this helpful. Feels so good. Yeah, so the last layout that I have here is kind of great, and here we are getting into some limitations. This will be like a little complicated math here. And yeah, this is where we are hitting the limitations of Flexbox, and we are getting into the realm where CSS grid would be better, and I will show you that in a bit why. So what we are doing here is that we want this one to occupy the space of the two columns, or like these two boxes. And yeah, but still we have this gap here. So what we are doing here is set to 60 pixels, and it's set to grow. So we are basically specifying the space by this one, which is not set to grow, but it is set here with this to this ridiculous number, which is the 33.333 to get as closest as possible to the third. But then we need to subtract from it part of the gap, and not just half, but we need to subtract the part of the gap that is the inverted ratio to the width of these two. If this would be, if there was no gap, this would be 70, no, this would be the, if there was no gap, this would be the 66.666, and this would be the 3333. So we need to take the ratio from these numbers, multiply the gap with it, which is the 20 pixels, and then subtract this number that we will get, that this is the result of the multiplying the ratio, multiplying the gap with this ratio, and subtract this gap from this width, from the third, because that's the amount of gap that in the calculation of how Flexbox, how browser is calculating it, that's how it takes in account the gap. So this is not ideal, like this is mind twisting. I kind of always have to do it try and error, and it changes obviously with the different amount of columns. So this is a mess, and although I made it work, there is also some little difference, like fraction of pixel difference between this one and this one, depending on the way we stretch it. So this would be a job for Grid actually. So let me fire up Bricks that recently implemented Grid, just to show you what is Grid about. It's a little bit similar in the way that don't worry about the interface if you don't know Bricks. Just imagine think in CSS. So we have this container here that is set to Grid with a gap. It's still using gap 20 pixels, but we are using this setting here that is saying that we want 4 columns that each occupying one portion, one fraction of this width of this layout. And yeah, like here this is a little bit more straightforward because we are not using percentages, which in Flexbox don't end up being the exact percentage, but still the ratio. Here we are really talking ratios, so it's 1 to 1 to 1 to 1, and straightforward, and it's set. It's not some percentage that ends up being something else because of its ratio to other percentage number. So it's much more straightforward. And yeah, so we have similar layouts to this one here. And this one is exact because here for the first element, for the first block inside of this grid container, we have set it to stretch from the first one up until the fourth one. This is some specificity of the grid syntax that's saying to the fourth doesn't include the fourth column or fourth section. So it's from the first one to the fourth one, not including the fourth one. So you can see it stretches over the first 3. If I set it to 3, it will stretch over the first 2. And I'm setting this one on the element. So yeah, so I'll set it back to 4. So this one the grid makes it easier to do this kind of layouts. On the other hand, the limitation is that there is no way to center them. Or there are some ways, but no, not very native, straightforward way how grid works to center these elements. So it's easier to do this stretching over multiple columns, but then if I would want to center them, I would be better off with the Flexbox. And going back to, for example, this layout, it would be almost impossible to do with grid. Would be definitely not suitable to do this bleed with grid. It's better to take advantage of the Flexbox figuring out how to occupy a space that it's changing, then just limited by something else that is rigid. That's what Flexbox is all about, and that's where it's super handy. So I promised you also responsive design, so let me just show you how these layouts work on a mobile. So we have this first one that is set here, so you can see that it is shrinking nicely until it becomes 1, which I think is on the mobile, because in the mobile breakpoint we have it set, we have this one is set to, it keeps being 45% to stay 2 on a tablet, and on a mobile we gave it the width of 100% so that it occupies the full width. And for example, this one we have set even on mobile to be 2 columns, which we achieved by giving it 32% width on mobile, while on desktop it has 26 to be 3. So you can see that this one, these stars, they are 3, and they are nicely shrinking until they become 2, and they continue being 2. It's a little slow. It's responsive, but it's a little slow on, because I'm recording and maybe the computer is already tired. It's evening. So yeah, so these stay 2 columns on mobile. I become 3 on desktop. This is the essence of building websites. You always have some boxy structure that needs to be rearranging for mobile. So feel free to go and try to experiment with it and not focus on how things look like, but just how this works, because I believe you spending like half an hour playing with this and understanding how it works will save you tons of hours when you are actually building a design in Elementor, because when you are building actual design, you are caring about how it looks on the desktop. You kind of forget about mobile, and then when you go to a mobile, it's all mess and you need to be nitpicking and arranging everything to be responsive. But if you understand these concepts and you already implement them when you are building the desktop version of your website, it will almost automatically, like you need to adjust things, you need to adjust the percentages for the mobile, but it will be already ready for it, and it will be responsive in very short time, much faster than if you don't think about this ahead. So yeah, there is much more videos coming, so if you like this one, please subscribe, comment below, share it with some friends or colleagues that could find this useful, because yeah, we are a community and we need to help each other. And I'm also going to be launching a course for people who are using Elementor or other builders, where you will learn the basics of CSS, JavaScript and semantic HTML and how to use it by building a custom theme, just like coding it. But I promise it is simple. I will walk you through every step, and by understanding those concepts, by building this one theme that will be very easy to build, I will share with you exactly the knowledge that I had when I entered the Elementor and page builder space, but that helps me to go very fast and grow very fast from just a beginner to somebody that is now helping much more senior web designers to tackle complicated layouts and any particularities that they encounter when building their designs, and they just cannot tackle when they don't understand these concepts. And I believe it's not a lot that you need to know, but it will help you immensely. So if it's something that interests you, there will be a link in the description, and if it's not out yet, there will be a waiting list. So by letting me know that you are interested, you will really spark more my motivation to work on it more, as I'm very busy with client work, but there is a lot. There's a lot that from these past projects I want to share with the world. So yeah, let me know if it's something that interests you, and subscribe so that you don't miss my future videos. Thank you for watching. Bye.